So Russell Westbrook so far for Houston has been interesting, I guess is one way to put it. He did just have what may have been his best game of the season. He was very efficient, had a triple-double and all that. And Westbrook is still giving this team a lot, but the efficiency matters. And while we were frightened of Russ's efficiency going into this season, I think we thought, okay, new team, maybe he can get some easier shots, whatever else. No, it's still getting worse. He's shooting 41% from the field, 22% from three. The free throws are a little better, to be nice, but he's just missing a lot of shots right now. He's basically terrible from everywhere that is not at the basket. And he only attempts about 34% of his shots at the rim. So it's a lot of mid-rangers and threes and weird turnaround things, and pretty much none of them are going in consistently, right? And the lineup numbers are not kind to Russ either. They would suggest that this team is much better without him. Now, to be fair, him with Harden is pretty good, and I mean, that's the main thing. And even if the numbers suggest this team is better without Russ, that doesn't mean he's not going to keep playing. Obviously, the ceiling is at its highest with Westbrook in the game for this team. So, what does this all mean, and what do we do with all of this? Well, you know, he's getting the ball less. I think he's averaging like 75 touches a game this season. Last year it was at 90. It was probably higher the farther you go back. And I think it's been a bit of an adjustment for him. I feel like D'Antoni has kind of just asked Russ to ISO quite a bit, which leads to a lot of those mid-rangers, and Russ, he's been a bad ISO player for years now. I mean, you look at the numbers and it's just not very good. I mean, he's at 6.5 ISOs a game right now, 0.84 points a possession. Last season it was 0.75, which is even worse. You know, it's just not very good. On the flip side, I think he could have more success getting screens from Capella. Now, even when they have done that a little bit, it can lead to Russ just pulling up on mid-rangers, but I still feel better about the potential of him making those as opposed to him just ISOing, because at least on the screens, it just gets the offense moving a little bit. But of course, that's going to require D'Antoni to be more like, hey, let's have an actual offense besides just Harden ISOing. I mean, one thing we got to remember for why Chris Paul was so good for them that first year is he was a great ISO player that season. And Westbrook just doesn't really have CP's shot making, so I don't think you can just ask Russ to create something out of nothing at this point, because it's just not going to go very well. So with screens, hopefully it'll just be a little better. I mean, Russ, this season he's averaging like 4 pick and rolls a game. And I have to assume, you know, that combined with touching the ball a lot less and watching Harden do his thing, it probably just doesn't allow him to really get into the feel of the game, I guess. Now, for everything I say about his ISO numbers not being good the past couple years, his pick and roll numbers have not been great either. But if I have to choose between one of those two things for Russ, then I'm definitely going to choose getting screens from Capella. I would say Russ should also like set screens for Harden or something, but I'm not really going to hold off on that one. I think one thing that would be cool is if they get Russ going early in a possession and then they have Capella just set a really high screen to where it can just get Russ going downhill a bit. Because we know Harden would be an amazing floor spacer just by simply standing there. And then between Austin Rivers, Daniel House, Capella, who would be rolling at that point, and, you know, Russ just going downhill, like, you know, that could probably have some success. Other things that I think are interesting is how teams are double teaming Harden now. And Russ, at least in the one game that I saw recently, he had the smarts to get to the middle of the floor. And I think he missed a layup or whatever. But I think there's a lot of potential with that thing, you know? double team on Harden, which teams are doing that because they can dare Westbrook to shoot threes, and, well, they're right to do it so far. He's been really bad on them. But if the idea can be getting inside off of those Harden double teams, then I think there's a lot of potential there. But it's going to require Westbrook to be decisive. He can't be a second too late. He can't bail the defense out by then hoisting up a mid-ranger once he gets it on the middle of the floor, Because I do trust him to make the right pass. I mean, for all the crap the guy has gotten for years now about whatever, he's still a very good playmaker, okay? He sees open guys, and I know there's been a little bit of talk about his turnovers per game, but I don't really care about that. Like, his usage is 32%, his assist percentage is 36%, his turnover percentage is 16.5%. Like, there's a pretty big gap with all of that stuff. So, yeah. Now, of course, it would be nice if he just made shots again. I mean, it's kind of wild to say, because for a while, Westbrook was a pretty good mid-range shooter. I mean, he wasn't amazing. He wasn't like Chris Paul, but there were definitely years where he was shooting over 40% from, the mid-range, combined with shooting a crap ton of free throws, and it just all kind of worked out. And I don't really know why his jumper has just fallen off. I mean, some of it was his shot selection was never amazing, and you could argue it just simply caught up with him eventually. But besides that, like, is it just his form? Like, his form is not great. It's very, I don't know. It's kind of like a violent form in a way. It's like he goes up and then he brings it over his head really quick. And then it's kind of like a slingshot sort of thing rather than just one fluid motion. And I feel like he also jumps kind of really high on his jumper, which is not typically the case. You usually want more of just like a little hop. And I think just all that stuff going on combined with whatever else, just age and not the best shot selection, to where, here we go, dude can't make a jumper right now. So anyway, how do I feel about this whole thing playing out? Well, I mean, when you look at Russ's recent playoff efficiency, past 3 years out in the first round each year, it's really bad. Okay, dude's in the 30s and his field goal percentages. The free throws make up for it, but even so, it's a lot of missed shots. And you could just say that the trend is continuing. So, I mean, there are definitely adjustments that can be made to get him going towards the basket a little bit more and stuff, but there's a chance that this is just what the Rockets signed up for. A guy who is going to miss a whole lot of shots when you really need him to be amazing for you. And that is a bit of a cynical way of looking at it, but there's a lot of evidence combined with what we've seen this season to just suggest that Westbrook is on the decline. Just is what it is. So while I think they can certainly help it with, play style changes and things like that, how much of a real difference is that going to make? I don't know. Anyway, if we talk about just Houston in general for a little bit, where do they sit right now in the Western Conference? They are the 5th seed. They are 1 game away from the 2 seed. So, that's the West for you, of course. And they do have a nice little cushion on the Jazz right now at number 6, about 2.5 games. So they do have a little bit of room to lose, basically. I mean, I think they're really hoping that Gordon can come back and be good, be a solid 17, 18 point guy and just shoot a whole lot of threes. I mean, he's kind of only shooting threes at this point in his career. That's why his field goal percentage was rough the past few seasons, because it almost mirrors his 3-point percentage, But even so, he really fell off. So if he can come back and be good, then that can give them their ideal 5-man lineup, Russ, Harden, Gordon, PJ, and Capella. And then you have Daniel House to come off the bench. And even then, maybe Daniel House would just start over Gordon. I mean, he's certainly been better than Gordon when Gordon has played this season. So maybe you would go with that and you'd have Goran, but you'd really have like a 6-man rotation that you'd feel good with. And then you just hope that between Austin Rivers and Tyson Chandler and Ben McElmore, who has been pretty good lately, that you just get enough out of those guys, you know? Do I have any thoughts on Clint Capella? I think the one thing to notice is that he's doing a little bit more from floater range, shooting about 42% from 3 to 10 feet. And that's kind of important because teams just don't defend him when it gets deep into the postseason. They dare him to do something off the dribble, you know, and he can't do it. So then that gives the defense time to get back to him and close out on shooters, and there you go. The possession is dead. So if he has a little bit of a floater, that would be huge. I still fear that he's too thin. So let's say these guys get into a playoff series with the Clippers. I'm kind of afraid that a guy like Zubats would just basically nullify everything Capella does, even if you would say Capella's a better player than Zubats, but, you know, the matchup and everything, even if they're technically listed at the same weight, whatever. Anyway, I think that'll do it. I feel solid about Houston. They were my pick to get the 1 seed. They were not my pick to make the finals, and I don't know, they're 4.5 games out of the 1 seed, so maybe that won't happen, but they're definitely a team to care about, and hopefully Russ can figure things out.